Tonight, we explore four remarkable comebacks in NBA history, each defying impossible odds. From finals heroics to playoff miracles, these moments remind us that greatness emerges when belief outlasts doubt. There exists a particular kind of silence that fills an arena when defeat seems inevitable. It settles over the crowd like a heavy blanket, muffling the cheers that once echoed through the rafters. Fans begin gathering their belongings, heading toward the exits, convinced the story has already reached its conclusion. The scoreboard tells one truth, harsh and unforgiving, while somewhere beneath the surface, another truth waits to be discovered. Comebacks represent something deeper than statistical anomalies or strategic adjustments. They speak to the human capacity for belief when every logical indicator suggests surrender. They remind us that the game clock continues moving forward regardless of the deficit, that 48 minutes contains infinite possibilities, and that sometimes the greatest performances emerge from the darkest moments. Tonight, we explore four such moments, four times when teams faced seemingly insurmountable odds and chose to continue fighting. One team trailed 3-1 in the NBA Finals, staring at a deficit no team had ever overcome in championship history. Another found themselves down 31 points in a playoff game against the defending champions. A third fell behind by 24 points in a finals game on the road. And a fourth faced a 36-point halftime deficit, the kind of margin that sends fans streaming toward the parking lots.
These stories share common threads. Each began with doubt, the kind that creeps into locker rooms and sits heavily on tired shoulders. Each required something beyond physical talent, demanding instead a collective decision to ignore the scoreboard and focus only on the next possession, the next defensive stop, the next made basket. Each transformed arenas from funeral processions into celebrations of human resilience. The first story takes us to Cleveland, a city that knew heartbreak better than triumph. For 52 years, no major professional sports team had brought a championship to the city along the shores of Lake Erie. The Browns, the Indians, the Cavaliers, all had come close at various points, each falling short in ways that became part of the city's collective memory. The losses accumulated like winter snow, each one adding another layer to the burden carried by Cleveland's faithful. In 2014, LeBron James returned home. His departure 4 years earlier had fractured the relationship between player and city. But time softens sharp edges, and LeBron carried with him a promise that transcended basketball. He spoke openly about his mission, about bringing a championship to the place that raised him, about fulfilling a destiny that had eluded Cleveland for more than half a century. The first year back ended in the finals, the Cavaliers facing the Golden State Warriors in June of 2015. Injuries devastated Cleveland's roster. Kyrie Irving suffered a fractured kneecap in Game 1. Kevin Love had already fallen to a shoulder injury in the first round.
LeBron carried his undermanned team to 6 games before the Warriors claimed their first championship in 40 years. The defeat stung, but it also revealed something important. Cleveland belonged among the elite. With a healthy roster, they could compete with anyone. The following season brought new challenges and new possibilities. The Warriors added depth, refined their system, and played basketball that bordered on perfection. They won 73 games, breaking the Chicago Bulls record of 72 victories that had stood since 1996. Stephen Curry earned unanimous Most Valuable Player honors, becoming the first player ever to receive every vote. Klay Thompson and Draymond Green elevated their games. The Warriors entered the playoffs as favorites, not just to win the championship, but to cement their place among the greatest teams in basketball history. Cleveland navigated the Eastern Conference playoffs efficiently, losing just 2 games before reaching the finals. The rematch everyone anticipated arrived in June of 2016. Warriors against Cavaliers, Curry against LeBron, the record-breaking season against the city's redemption narrative. Golden State seized control immediately, winning Game 1 in Oakland by 15 points. Cleveland responded with a Game 2 victory, evening the series before it shifted to Cleveland. The Warriors dominated Game 3, then carried that momentum into Game 4, building a comfortable lead before holding off a late Cleveland rally to take a 3-1 series advantage.
The historical weight of that deficit cannot be overstated. In the 70 years of NBA Finals history, 32 teams had faced 3-1 deficits in the championship series. All 32 had lost. The Warriors needed just one more victory. They would have 2 chances to secure it. The first at home in Oakland, where they had lost only 3 games all season. Every statistical model, every historical precedent, every logical analysis pointed toward the same conclusion. Golden State would become champions again. Cleveland's dream would die in the same city where it had perished 1 year earlier. But something shifted in that moment. Perhaps it was the desperation born from understanding this represented Cleveland's best chance, their window of opportunity that might never open so wide again. Perhaps it was LeBron James recognizing the magnitude of broken promises and unfulfilled legacies. Perhaps it was the entire team collectively deciding that surrender required conscious choice, and they chose differently. The story of what happened next begins not with Game 7's final minutes, but with the determination that carried Cleveland through the 3 preceding games. It begins with a team deciding that impossible odds simply meant no one had accomplished the task yet. It begins with belief taking root in soil where logic insisted nothing could grow. Game 5 returned the series to Oakland, where the Warriors had been nearly invincible all season. But the game carried an unusual element of uncertainty. Draymond Green received a suspension for accumulating too many flagrant foul points during the playoffs. His absence created a void in Golden State's defensive versatility and emotional leadership. Cleveland recognized the opportunity.
LeBron James delivered 41 points, 16 rebounds, and 7 assists. Kyrie Irving added 41 points of his own, becoming the first teammates in finals history to each score 40 in the same game. Cleveland's offense flowed with precision, finding good shots against a Warriors defense missing its most versatile defender. The Cavaliers won by 15 points, cutting the series deficit to 3-2 and forcing Game 6 back to Cleveland. The pressure shifted. Cleveland had defended home court, but now they needed to do it again. The Warriors arrived at Quicken Loans Arena, needing just one victory to claim the championship. The city of Cleveland packed the building, knowing this might represent their final chance to keep the dream alive. LeBron James produced 41 points again, adding 11 rebounds and 8 assists. The defense smothered Golden State's shooters, limiting Curry and Thompson to inefficient nights. Cleveland won by 14 points, forcing the impossible, a Game 7 in Oakland to decide the championship. History waited to be made. Either the Warriors would complete their spectacular season with a title, or Cleveland would become the first team ever to overcome 3-1 in the finals. Either Curry would add championship most valuable player to his unanimous regular season award,
or LeBron would deliver on the promise he made when he returned home. Either Golden State would validate their 73-win season, or Cleveland would end 52 years of championship heartbreak.
Before we continue with how that Game 7 unfolded, another comeback story calls for attention. This one occurred 3 years later, on April 15, 2019, in a first-round playoff series that nobody expected to be competitive. The Los Angeles Clippers had barely qualified for the playoffs, claiming the 8th seed in the Western Conference with a 48-34 record. They faced the Golden State Warriors, winners of 3 championships in 4 years, owners of a dynasty that had redefined modern basketball. The Warriors welcomed back DeMarcus Cousins from injury, adding another All-Star to their already stacked roster. They had cruised to 57 regular season victories despite load managing their stars and treating the regular season as preparation for the playoffs that truly mattered. The Clippers represented everything the Warriors were not: young, unproven, built around players other teams had discarded or overlooked. Their best player, Lou Williams, came off the bench. They started 2 rookies, point guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and shooter Landry Shamet. They had traded away Tobias Harris at the deadline, seemingly conceding the season to begin rebuilding. That they made the playoffs at all seemed like a minor victory. That they might challenge the Warriors seemed impossible. Game 1 reinforced those expectations. Golden State won comfortably, 121-104, looking every bit like the dynasty everyone knew them to be. Game 2 began similarly. Playing at Oracle Arena before their home crowd, the Warriors jumped to an early lead and never relinquished control. By the end of the first quarter, they led by 19 points. The second quarter brought more dominance. The third quarter appeared ready to deliver the final blow.
DeMarcus Cousins suffered a torn quad muscle in the first quarter, a devastating injury that would end his playoff run. But even without him, the Warriors rolled forward. Their lead swelled to 24 points, then 27, then 30. With 7 minutes and 33 seconds remaining in the third quarter, the scoreboard displayed a number that seemed to end all doubt. Golden State 94, Los Angeles 63. 31 points separated the teams. The defending champions were destroying the 8th seed on their home court, exactly as everyone anticipated. Fans began leaving Oracle Arena. Those who remained settled into their seats, content to watch garbage time, perhaps checking their phones or discussing where they might grab dinner after the inevitable victory. The Clippers gathered during a timeout. Coach Doc Rivers spoke to his young team. The words remained private, but the response became public record. Lou Williams had been the NBA's 6th Man of the Year the previous season and would win it again this year. He embodied the Clippers' identity: overlooked, underestimated, and utterly fearless. He began attacking the Warriors' defense with the same aggression he showed when the game was close. Baskets came in bunches. Montrezl Harrell, another bench player, matched his energy. Patrick Beverley, the defensive specialist, began pressing full court, turning up the intensity, daring the Warriors to break the pressure. Something unexpected happened. The Warriors, so accustomed to cruising to comfortable victories, lost their focus. Turnovers mounted. Open shots clanked off the rim. The Clippers kept attacking, kept defending, kept believing that the impossible might become possible if they simply refused to quit. The third quarter became a showcase of Los Angeles' resilience. They outscored Golden State 36-24 in those 12 minutes, cutting the deficit from 31 to 19 heading into the final period.
The comeback had begun, but it remained incomplete. 19 points with 12 minutes to play still represented a massive gap, especially against a team that had won 3 championships in 4 years. The Warriors knew how to close games. They had been in this position countless times. They would steady themselves, execute their offense, and close out the victory. The script was written. Everyone knew how it ended. Except the Clippers never read that script. They continued their assault in the fourth quarter, the energy building with each made basket, each defensive stop. Lou Williams finished the game with 36 points, 17 coming in the third quarter alone. Montrezl Harrell added 25 points off the bench, his relentless energy exhausting the Warriors' bigs. Landry Shamet, the rookie, knocked down critical three-pointers. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander played with poise beyond his years. The lead continued shrinking. 15 points, 12 points, 8 points. The Oracle Arena crowd, so comfortable earlier, grew anxious. The Warriors called timeouts, trying to stop the momentum. But momentum does not always listen to whistles. The Clippers kept coming, wave after wave, refusing to acknowledge the impossibility of what they were attempting.
With just over 4 minutes remaining in the game, the Clippers had cut the deficit to single digits. Patrick Beverley harassed Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant on every possession, his defensive intensity frustrating 2 of the greatest scorers in basketball history. Durant, who rarely showed visible frustration, began forcing shots, trying to stem the tide through individual brilliance rather than team execution. The strategy backfired. Difficult shots missed. Turnovers mounted. Lou Williams continued his masterful performance. He attacked off the dribble, his change of pace and uncanny ability to draw fouls putting constant pressure on Golden State's defense. When the Warriors double-teamed him, he found open teammates. When they played him straight up, he scored. There seemed no answer to his offensive creativity, no defensive scheme that could contain his determination. The lead shrank to 5 points, then 3. Oracle Arena, which had been celebrating an easy victory 30 minutes earlier, now stood in shocked silence. The impossible was happening. The 8th-seeded Clippers, written off as playoff fodder, were completing one of the greatest comebacks in playoff history. With 1 minute and 42 seconds remaining, Montrezl Harrell tied the game with a putback layup. The building erupted in anxious energy. Warriors fans had witnessed their team overcome deficits before, had seen championship runs built on resilience and fourth-quarter execution. They believed their team would respond, that Durant or Curry would deliver a dagger three-pointer, that experience would triumph over youth. The teams traded baskets. The clock ticked below 1 minute. The game remained tied. The Warriors worked for a good shot, the ball swinging around the perimeter. Curry caught it on the wing, elevated for 3. The shot felt true, leaving his hands, the kind of moment that defines championships. It clanked off the back rim. The Clippers secured the rebound, called timeout with 33.9 seconds remaining. Doc Rivers designed a play for Lou Williams, trusting his most experienced player with the biggest possession. But Golden State knew the play was coming. They loaded up on Williams, taking away his driving lanes. The ball swung to Landry Shamet, the rookie, standing alone in the corner. 22 years old, 40 games of NBA experience, facing the dynasty that had defined a generation, the building holding its breath. Shamet caught the pass, rose into his shooting motion, and released. The ball rotated perfectly through the air, a thing of beauty spinning toward the rim. It dropped cleanly through the net with 16.5 seconds remaining. Los Angeles 134, Golden State 131. The Clippers led.
The Warriors had one final possession. They pushed the ball up court, working for the tying three-pointer that would send the game to overtime. Curry came off a screen, caught the pass, elevated. His form was perfect, the mechanics flawless. The shot missed. The Clippers secured the rebound. Lou Williams made a free throw to ice the game. Final score, 135-131. The largest comeback in playoff history. 31 points erased. The impossible made possible by a collection of players who refused to accept what the scoreboard told them. Young players who had not yet learned that such comebacks do not happen. Veteran players who had been discarded by other teams and found something to prove. A coach who believed in his team even when belief seemed foolish. The Clippers would eventually lose that series to the Warriors, 4-2, but Game 2 existed as its own entity, a perfect encapsulation of what becomes possible when a team decides that the score represents only numbers, not destiny. Lou Williams and his teammates showed that youth and energy and belief can challenge even the mightiest dynasties, that experience and championships do not grant immunity from upset, that every game begins 0-0 regardless of what happened in the previous 40 or 45 minutes. Our third comeback takes us back in time to June 12, 2008, when the Boston Celtics visited the Los Angeles Lakers for Game 4 of the NBA Finals. The rivalry between these two franchises stretches back decades, woven into the fabric of basketball history. They had met in the finals 11 times before 2008, with Boston winning 9 of those encounters. But they had not faced each other in the championship round since 1987, more than 20 years earlier.
The 2007 to 2008 season represented a renaissance for the Celtics. The previous year, Boston had won just 24 games, one of the worst records in franchise history. Then general manager Danny Ainge orchestrated one of the boldest rebuilding strategies in NBA history. He traded for Kevin Garnett from Minnesota and Ray Allen from Seattle, pairing them with Paul Pierce to form a big three that immediately transformed the franchise from lottery team to championship contender. The transformation exceeded even optimistic projections. Boston won 66 games during the regular season, the best record in the NBA. Garnett anchored a defense that ranked first in the league. Pierce provided scoring and leadership. Allen's shooting opened space for everyone else. Role players like Rajon Rondo, Kendrick Perkins, and James Posey fit perfectly into Coach Doc Rivers' system. The Celtics dominated the Eastern Conference playoffs, reaching the finals with a 14-3 record. The Lakers had their own superstar narrative. Kobe Bryant, in his 12th season, finally had the supporting cast he needed to contend for championships without Shaquille O'Neal. Pau Gasol arrived via trade at the deadline, giving Los Angeles an inside-outside combination that proved nearly unstoppable. The Lakers won 57 regular season games and navigated the brutal Western Conference playoffs to reach the finals. The series opened in Boston, where the Celtics won Game 1 by 39 points in a performance that shocked the basketball world. The Lakers responded with a Game 2 victory, evening the series before it shifted to Los Angeles. Game 3 went to the Lakers,
giving them home court advantage with the series at 2-1. Game 4 began disastrously for Boston. The Lakers exploded in the first quarter, making shot after shot, playing with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from feeling destiny on your side. Kobe Bryant scored 17 first-quarter points. The Lakers led 35-14 after 12 minutes, the largest first-quarter lead in finals history. The Staples Center crowd roared its approval, sensing that Los Angeles would even the series and shift all momentum in their favor. The second quarter brought no relief for Boston. The Lakers extended their lead to 24 points. Sasha Vujacic beat his chest after making a three-pointer, celebrating what felt like an inevitable victory. Everything that could go wrong for the Celtics went wrong. Open shots missed, defensive assignments were blown, the offense stagnated into isolation possessions that led nowhere. The deficit felt insurmountable, the kind of hole that championship teams simply do not escape in finals games on the road. Doc Rivers gathered his team during halftime. Down 18 points at the break after trailing by 24 earlier in the second quarter, the Celtics faced elimination of a different kind. Not elimination from the series, but elimination of credibility. Elite teams do not surrender meekly in finals games. Championship teams do not allow 24-point deficits on the road. Whatever happened in the second half would define how this team saw itself and how history remembered them.
The message in that locker room remains private, but the response became legendary. Boston emerged for the third quarter with renewed purpose. The defense, which had been carved apart in the first half, suddenly locked in. Kevin Garnett set the tone with his intensity, challenging shots, grabbing rebounds, communicating on every possession. Paul Pierce rediscovered his shooting touch. Ray Allen began moving off screens with his characteristic precision, his shooting threat forcing the Lakers to defend him honestly and opening driving lanes for others. The deficit shrank possession by possession. What seemed impossible at halftime became merely improbable midway through the third quarter. The Staples Center crowd, so celebratory earlier, grew anxious. The Lakers began pressing, trying to score quickly and re-establish the comfortable margin. But pressing leads to mistakes. Forced shots missed, turnovers accumulated. Boston's veteran poise contrasted sharply with Los Angeles's growing desperation. The Celtics closed the third quarter with a 21-3 run, completely flipping the game's momentum. The fourth quarter began with Boston trailing by just 6 points. The impossible comeback suddenly felt inevitable. James Posey, the veteran forward who had won a championship with Miami 2 years earlier, began knocking down three-pointers. P.J. Brown, another veteran presence off the bench, threw down a dunk over Kobe Bryant that sent a clear message. Boston would not surrender. The game was tied.
With 4 minutes and 7 seconds remaining, Eddie House hit a jumper that gave Boston its first lead since the opening minutes. The lead changed hands several times over the next few possessions, both teams executing in the clutch, both refusing to blink. Ray Allen, who had struggled early, delivered crucial baskets down the stretch. His double-clutch reverse layup with just over 2 minutes remaining gave Boston breathing room. His isolation finished over Sasha Vujacic extended the lead to 4 points. James Posey buried another three-pointer from the corner. The Celtics' defense forced turnovers and contested shots. The Lakers, so dominant in the first half, could not solve Boston's adjustments. Kobe Bryant scored 17 points on the night, but managed just 6 in the second half, as the Celtics focused their defensive attention on containing him. The final score read 97-91. Boston completed a 24-point comeback,
the largest finals comeback since 1971. The series stood at 3-1, with the Celtics needing just one more victory to claim the championship. More importantly, they had proven to themselves and the basketball world that they possessed championship mettle, the kind of resilience that distinguishes great teams from merely good ones. James Posey finished with 18 points off the bench, all coming in the second half. Paul Pierce scored 19 points despite early struggles. Kevin Garnett contributed 14 points and 13 rebounds, while anchoring the defense that held Los Angeles to 37 second-half points after surrendering 56 in the first half. The comeback announced that Boston would not be denied. The Lakers had played their best half of basketball and built a massive lead, yet it proved insufficient. The Celtics possessed something deeper than talent, something that statistical analysis could not measure. They had belief forged through adversity, veteran leadership that understood how to navigate difficult moments, and the collective determination to fight through any deficit. That Game 4 comeback set the stage for Boston to close out the series in Game 6 back in Los Angeles, claiming the franchise's 17th championship. The banner that hangs in the rafters traces its lineage directly to that June night when the Celtics refused to accept what the scoreboard told them, choosing instead to write their own ending. Our final comeback story takes us back to November 27, 1996, to the Delta Center in Salt Lake City. The Utah Jazz had established themselves as perennial contenders by this point, powered by the legendary duo of Karl Malone and John Stockton. They had reached the Western Conference Finals the previous spring, falling to Seattle in Game 7. The loss stung, but it also motivated the Jazz entering the new season. Utah started strong, winning 9 of their first 11 games, including 7 consecutive victories. Karl Malone was in his prime, a 2-time most valuable player who dominated in the post with his physicality and skill. John Stockton ran the offense with his characteristic precision, his court vision and passing creating easy baskets for teammates. The Jazz played a methodical, efficient style that wore down opponents over 48 minutes.
The Denver Nuggets arrived in Salt Lake City struggling. Their record stood at 4 wins and 13 losses. They appeared overmatched against a Jazz team hitting its stride. The game seemed like a formality, an easy home victory for Utah before they embarked on a longer road trip. The first quarter shattered those expectations. Denver could not miss. Dale Ellis and Brian Stiff made shot after shot from the perimeter. The Nuggets shot an absurd 73% from the field in the first half, the kind of offensive explosion that rarely happens even in practice. They made 14 of their first 15 shots, a statistical anomaly that left the Jazz defense grasping at explanations. By halftime, the scoreboard displayed numbers that seemed impossible. Denver 70, Utah 36. The 34-point deficit represented the kind of margin that ends competitive games, that sends starters to the bench for rest, that transforms arenas into practice facilities where young players get garbage time experience. The Delta Center crowd sat in stunned silence as the teams left the court for halftime. Some fans headed for the exits, convinced the game was over. Those who remained seemed more interested in conversations with neighbors than in the action on the court. The Jazz had been embarrassed on their home floor, torn apart by an opponent they were supposed to handle easily. The question centered not on whether Denver would win, but on how large the final margin might be. Jerry Sloan gathered his team in the locker room. The longtime Jazz coach had built his reputation on toughness and accountability. He preached defense, effort, and executing fundamentals regardless of the score. His halftime message likely included harsh truths about effort and focus, but it also contained something else: a plan. Sloan decided to deploy a more aggressive defensive trap, pressuring Denver's ball handlers and forcing them to make quick decisions. The strategy carried risk. If Denver broke the pressure, they would get easy baskets. But trailing by 34 points at halftime, conservative approaches offered no path to victory. The Jazz needed to disrupt Denver's rhythm, to turn the game chaotic, and hope the Nuggets could not maintain their impossibly hot shooting. The third quarter began, and immediately the adjustment bore fruit. Denver, so comfortable in the first half when allowed to run their offense without pressure, struggled against the increased intensity. Turnovers mounted. Shots that fell effortlessly in the first half now clanked off the rim. The Jazz ran in transition off those turnovers, getting easy baskets before Denver could set its defense. Karl Malone dominated in the post, drawing fouls and converting free throws. He scored 15 points in the third quarter alone, imposing his will on Denver's interior defenders. John Stockton pushed the pace, his quick decision-making punishing Denver for mistakes. The role players fed off the energy. The Delta Center crowd, dormant earlier, began to stir. The most remarkable defensive performance of the quarter came from an unlikely source. The Jazz held Denver to just 2 field goals in the entire third quarter, a suffocating display of defensive intensity that completely stifled the offense that had been unstoppable in the first half. From shooting 73%, Denver collapsed to missing everything. The basketball gods, so generous in the first half, withdrew their favor. Utah outscored Denver 36-15 in the third quarter, cutting the deficit from 34 points to 13 entering the final period. The impossible comeback suddenly appeared possible. The crowd roared its approval. The energy in the building transformed from funeral wake to championship atmosphere. The Jazz believed. More importantly, Denver began to doubt. The fourth quarter became a showcase of Utah's championship character. Jeff Hornacek, the veteran guard, caught fire from the perimeter. His three-point shooting stretched Denver's defense and created driving lanes for others. Chris Morris provided energy off the bench, his intensity setting the tone on both ends. Karl Malone continued punishing Denver in the post. John Stockton orchestrated everything, his leadership holding the team together as the comeback unfolded possession by possession. Denver tried to stop the bleeding, but they had been shaken. The confident team that built a 34-point lead had disappeared, replaced by players looking over their shoulders, pressing too hard, making mistakes. The lead evaporated. 13 points became 10. 10 became 7. 7 became 4. The Jazz kept coming, relentless and determined. With just over 1 minute remaining, Utah took its first lead since the opening minutes. Jeff Hornacek delivered the decisive blow, a three-pointer with 1 minute and 18 seconds left that gave the Jazz the lead for good. The Delta Center exploded. Fans who had left early missed witnessing history. Those who stayed experienced something they would remember forever. The final score read 107-103. The Jazz had completed a 36-point comeback, the largest in NBA regular season history, a record that still stands today, nearly 3 decades later. A deficit that seemed to end the game at halftime became instead the prologue to one of the most remarkable comebacks basketball has ever witnessed. Karl Malone finished with 32 points and 15 rebounds. John Stockton added 18 points and 13 assists, controlling the game after halftime. Jeff Hornacek scored 20 points, including the dagger three-pointer. But the comeback belonged to the entire team,
to the collective decision to ignore the scoreboard and focus only on the next possession, to the adjustments Jerry Sloan made and the players executed with precision. The victory carried no playoff implications, no championship significance. It was a regular season game in November against a mediocre opponent, yet it lives in basketball lore as one of the great comebacks, a reminder that no lead is safe, that 48 minutes means 48 minutes, that giving up represents a choice rather than an inevitability.
Denver's hot shooting in the first half created a lead that should have held, but sustainable basketball requires more than one great half. It requires the ability to adjust when opponents make changes, to maintain composure when momentum shifts, to execute under pressure when the game hangs in balance. The Nuggets learned those lessons the hard way, watching a seemingly certain victory dissolve into a historic defeat. For the Jazz, the comeback validated their identity as a team that never quit. They would go on to reach the finals the next 2 seasons, falling both times to Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls. But those finals appearances traced their lineage to moments like this November night, when the team demonstrated the resilience and character that separated contenders from pretenders. The 4 comeback stories we have explored tonight share common elements that transcend basketball. They speak to human nature, to our capacity for resilience when circumstances appear hopeless. They remind us that scoreboards measure only the past, not the future, and that every possession offers a chance to change the narrative. But one story remains incomplete. We left the Cleveland Cavaliers and Golden State Warriors tied at 3 games each in the 2016 NBA Finals, preparing for Game 7 on June 19, 2016, at Oracle Arena. The winner would claim the championship. The loser would face questions about legacy and missed opportunities. History waited to be written. The game began with both teams playing cautiously, feeling each other out, understanding the magnitude of the moment. The first quarter ended with Cleveland leading by 2 points. The second quarter saw Golden State take a 7-point lead, only for Cleveland to close the half on a run that cut the deficit to 3 points at intermission. The game remained tense, neither team able to pull away, both executing their game plans with championship-level intensity. The third quarter tightened further. The Warriors built leads that Cleveland erased. The Cavaliers took leads that Golden State countered. Neither team blinked. Neither team panicked. The quarter ended with the game tied at 76. 12 minutes remained to decide who would be crowned champion, who would fulfill their destiny, which narrative would dominate basketball conversations for years to come. The fourth quarter began with both teams trading baskets. Stephen Curry made a 3-pointer. LeBron James answered with a layup. Kyrie Irving hit a jumper. Klay Thompson responded with his own bucket. The game stayed within 1 possession, the tension building with each passing minute. Oracle Arena vibrated with nervous energy, fans understanding they were witnessing something historic, regardless of the outcome. With 4 minutes and 39 seconds remaining, Stephen Curry made a 3-pointer that gave Golden State an 89-87 lead. Both teams then went cold. Possessions became battles of nerves and execution. Defense dominated. The Warriors maintained their 2-point lead as the clock ticked below 3 minutes, then below 2 minutes. Cleveland needed a basket. Golden State needed one more defensive stop.
With 1 minute and 50 seconds remaining, Andre Iguodala stole a pass and raced toward what appeared to be an easy layup that would extend Golden State's lead to 4 points and likely seal the championship. But LeBron James, trailing the play, exploded forward in pursuit. He left his feet from near the free throw line, soaring toward the rim. Iguodala released his layup attempt. LeBron's hand arrived at the perfect moment, swatting the ball against the backboard in what would be remembered simply as the block. The crowd gasped. The play seemed impossible from the moment LeBron began his chase, but impossible had defined this series, this comeback, this team. The block kept the game at 89-87. Cleveland brought the ball up court. The offense worked through several possessions without scoring. Golden State called timeout with 53 seconds remaining, still clinging to their 2-point lead. Out of the timeout, Kyrie Irving took control. He isolated Stephen Curry at the top of the key, using his exceptional ball handling to create space. He stepped back beyond the three-point line and rose into his shooting motion. Curry contested, his hand in Irving's face, but the shot felt true. The ball sailed through the air, spinning perfectly, and dropped cleanly through the net with 53 seconds remaining. Cleveland 90, Golden State 89. The Warriors had one final chance. They worked the ball around the perimeter, looking for an open shot. Kevin Love found himself defending Stephen Curry in the paint, a mismatch Golden State had exploited countless times throughout the season. But Love held his ground, contesting without fouling, forcing a difficult shot that missed. The Cavaliers secured the rebound. LeBron James made a free throw to extend the lead to 2 points. The Warriors had one last chance. The shot missed. Game over.
Final score: Cleveland 93, Golden State 89. The Cavaliers had completed the impossible, becoming the first team ever to overcome a 3-1 deficit in NBA Finals history. Cleveland's 52-year championship drought across all major sports ended. LeBron James had fulfilled his promise. The city erupted in celebration that lasted for days. LeBron James finished Game 7 with 27 points, 11 rebounds, and 11 assists. For the series, he averaged 29.7 points, 11.3 rebounds, 8.9 assists, 2.6 steals, and 2.3 blocks per game, becoming the first player ever to lead all players in all 5 major statistical categories in a finals series. He earned Finals Most Valuable Player honors unanimously. Kyrie Irving provided the dagger, his step-back three-pointer over Curry becoming one of the most iconic shots in NBA history. His 26 points in Game 7 perfectly complemented LeBron's all-around brilliance. Kevin Love's defensive stand on Curry in the final minute preserved the lead. The championship belonged to all of them, to the entire team that refused to accept defeat when down 3-1.
The 4 comebacks we have explored tonight: Cleveland's finals comeback, the Clippers' 31-point playoff rally, Boston's 24-point finals surge, and Utah's 36-point regular season miracle represent more than basketball achievements. They stand as testaments to human resilience, to the power of belief when logic suggests surrender, to the rewards that await those brave enough to keep fighting when defeat seems certain. Each comeback required a moment of collective decision, a team gathering during a timeout or at halftime, looking at each other and choosing to continue. Not because the path to victory seemed clear, but because the alternative, giving up, represented something worse than losing. It meant conceding that the scoreboard determined their fate, that the game was over before the final buzzer sounded, that they had no control over their destiny. The Clippers, facing the defending champions,
down 31 points, chose to keep playing with the same intensity they showed when the game began. Lou Williams attacked the rim with abandon. Patrick Beverley pressed full court as if the score was tied. Montrezl Harrell dove for loose balls and fought for rebounds. They played basketball the way it is meant to be played, with joy and ferocity and complete disregard for what seemed inevitable. The Celtics, humiliated by 24 points on the road in a finals game, chose to trust their defense and their championship pedigree. Kevin Garnett anchored the paint, challenging every shot, communicating every assignment. Paul Pierce found his rhythm. Ray Allen moved with purpose. James Posey knocked down three-pointers. They remembered who they were, a team that had won 66 games during the regular season, a team built specifically for this moment.
The Jazz, embarrassed by 36 points at halftime in front of their home crowd, chose to believe Jerry Sloan's halftime adjustments would work. They trapped ball handlers, forced turnovers, and ran in transition. Karl Malone imposed his will in the post. John Stockton controlled the tempo. Jeff Hornacek made clutch shots. They showed that regular season games in November matter, that professional pride demands maximum effort regardless of the score or the stakes. And the Cavaliers, facing a 3-1 finals deficit that no team had ever overcome, chose to believe in LeBron James and each other. They won Game 5 in Oakland. They defended home court in Game 6. They traveled back to Oracle Arena for Game 7 and played the game of their lives. They delivered a championship to a city that had waited 52 years. They proved that impossible simply means no one has done it yet. These comebacks teach us about basketball, but they also teach us about life, about refusing to quit when circumstances seem dire, about trusting the process when results do not immediately follow, about believing in yourself and your teammates when logic suggests you should walk away, about understanding that the scoreboard tells only part of the story, that time remains on the clock, that every possession matters.
They remind us that the greatest performances often emerge from the darkest moments, that pressure reveals character, that adversity either breaks teams or forges them into something stronger, that the difference between victory and defeat sometimes comes down to nothing more than the decision to keep playing, to take one more shot, to make one more defensive stop, to believe for one more possession. The players who delivered these comebacks became legends. LeBron James and Kyrie Irving lifting the Larry O'Brien Trophy in Oakland. Lou Williams and his young Clippers team showing the basketball world that heart matters. Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen celebrating on the Staples Center floor. Karl Malone and John Stockton proving that no lead is safe. Their names echo through basketball history not just because of their talent, but because of their resilience. The coaches who guided these comebacks demonstrated wisdom that extends beyond X's and O's. Tyronn Lue keeping his team believing when down 3-1. Doc Rivers making the adjustments that turned Game 4 around for both the Clippers and Celtics. Jerry Sloan implementing the defensive trap that stifled Denver. They showed that coaching means more than drawing up plays. It means understanding human nature, knowing when to challenge and when to encourage, maintaining composure when chaos threatens. The fans who witnessed these comebacks carry those memories forever. They tell their children and grandchildren about the night they saw the impossible, about staying in their seats when others left, about the moment when the deficit evaporated and belief became reality, about the pure joy of watching a team refuse to surrender. These games become part of personal history, moments frozen in time
that retain their power across decades. Basketball, at its core, measures the distance between where you are and where you want to be. Sometimes that distance appears impossible to cross. The scoreboard says you are 36 points behind with one half remaining. The series record says no team has ever come back from 3-1 in the finals. The playoff matchup says eighth seeds do not challenge dynasties. The historical precedent says 24-point deficits in finals games on the road do not transform into victories. But basketball also rewards those who ignore the distance and focus instead on the next step, the next possession, the next defensive stop, the next made basket, the next screen, pass, rebound, drawn charge, contested shot. All the small actions that accumulate into something larger. All the individual moments of effort and execution that combine to create history. These 4 comebacks happened because players and coaches chose to focus on what they could control rather than what the scoreboard told them. They could not control how many points they trailed by. They could not control how many games they had lost. They could not control the historical precedent working against them. But they could control their effort, their intensity, their belief, their execution. They could control whether they quit or continued fighting.
That choice, to keep fighting when defeat seems certain, separates ordinary teams from extraordinary ones. It marks the difference between players who accept what the scoreboard tells them and players who decide the final score has not been written yet. It distinguishes coaches who surrender to probability from coaches who understand that basketball games last 48 minutes regardless of what happens in the first 24. The comebacks we explored tonight occurred in different eras, involved different teams, and unfolded in different contexts. One decided a championship, another shocked the defending champions in the playoffs, a third saved a final series. The last came in a November regular season game. But they all share the same essential truth. The game is never over until the final buzzer sounds, and believing you can win represents the first step toward making it reality. These stories live on because they inspire. Young players watch footage of LeBron's block and Kyrie's three-pointer, dreaming of delivering championships to their own cities. Coaches studied Jerry Sloan's defensive adjustments and Doc Rivers' halftime speeches, learning how to guide teams through adversity. Fans remember the joy of witnessing the impossible, of staying in their seats when others left, of believing when doubt seemed more logical. The greatest comebacks happen not because of superhuman talent, though talent certainly helps. They happen because of human qualities that exist in all of us: resilience, determination, belief, courage, and the simple decision to keep trying when circumstances suggest we should quit. These qualities manifest on basketball courts, but apply everywhere. To careers that face setbacks, to relationships that encounter difficulties, to dreams that seem increasingly distant, to any situation where the scoreboard says you are losing and the clock keeps ticking.
Basketball provides the metaphor, but life supplies the application. The 36-point deficit becomes the business that struggles in its early years. The 3-games-to-1 series deficit becomes the student who fails the exam but continues studying. The 31-point playoff deficit becomes the artist whose work gets rejected repeatedly but keeps creating. The 24-point finals deficit becomes anyone who faces a setback and must decide whether to quit or continue. These 4 comebacks answer that question. They show what becomes possible when you choose to continue, when you focus on the next step rather than the distance remaining, when you trust your preparation and believe in yourself and your teammates,
when you understand that the scoreboard measures only the past while the future remains unwritten. Even now, decades later for some and years later for others, these four stories remind fans what steady greatness truly looks like. They show that believing in yourself matters more than probability. They prove that resilience can overcome talent, that character can triumph over circumstance, that heart can defeat dynasties. They inspire every young dreamer who dares to chase something beyond the ordinary, who faces a deficit that seems insurmountable, who must decide whether to surrender or fight. The scoreboard may say you are losing, but the game is never over until you decide it is. These comebacks teach us to keep playing, keep believing, keep fighting. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible becomes reality.